You know, when you get on that mountain, you're away from Cape Town. It is so large that it's like you're in the Karoo. It's a fact, you know. It is so wide in extent that you can walk virtually the whole day to go from the back that overlooks, shall we say, Kirstenbosch or Constantia, to the front. It will take you about 5 or 6 hours to walk, you know. It's so far. So to us it was like you're going away from Cape Town and you really had a holiday.
Welcome to another episode of the District 6 Museum Vusalela Ons Luister podcast series. This year we celebrate and mark 30 years of work of the District 6 Museum. And as part of that celebration, we are taking a retrospective look at our sound archive. So for this podcast, we are going to explore the collection of Table Mountain interviews from 1999 and 2000, conducted by Linda Fortune, a former resident of Tiny Street and an avid hiker and mountaineer. In this podcast, we will hear about the different adventures Table Mountain had to offer the people of District 6. We explore the intimate connection they had with the mountain and how this connection was severed after the Group Areas Act of 1950 forced people to move to the Cape Flats, taking them away from the slopes of where they were born. First, we listen to Vincent Kolbe.
The mountain has got that deep sort of connection with all of us Cape Townians because that's how we got to learn to know it.
Yes.
And then of course as you grow you look at it and you see it in its various moods. You see it when the sun rises, when the shadows fall this way. You see it when the sun sets, when the shadows fall that way. You see it when the clouds come that way and the clouds go that way. And you sit and watch in awe. And you have this great masterpiece that God created as a work of art. And you look at it all the time, whether you're going to school or whether you're going to church or whether you're just sitting and dreaming on your mother's stoop. These are physical landmarks in your life that you relate to the way Thomas Hardy relates to the heath, you know, or to, when you read the fiction. How you relate to people who live in the desert relate to their physical environment. And this is what Table Mountain gets into one's psyche. And the symbolism of it all is like mother. And eventually you see the mountain slopes like a mother's skirt. And my granny would tell me that when they were little, they used to hide under the mother's bustle. And you had all this kind of imagination. And you used to watch those clouds and wonder how come they don't come all the way down. And then your mom would say, it's a black southeaster. And it's really like billowing.
The children of District 6 were born in the embrace of Table Mountain. At a young age, sitting on their grandmother's laps, they were taught how to read the gradients of the slopes and the weather patterns of the winds and the clouds bellowing over the tabletop. They were encouraged to let their imagination run wild with the idea that the mountain was consistently moving and changing shape, that it had a life of its own. Their relationship with Table Mountain was innate, something Stan Abrams knows all too well.
It became a part of a relationship with us because we looked forward to go there over the weekends. In fact, there was a time we could, I don't know if it happens these days, but we slept over in the mountain. So we would walk up there maybe Friday afternoon and go up Knipe-Solomon and Skeleton Gorge and what was known as the pipe track. And we would walk up there. And there were special days when obviously we would walk all the way across to Maclear's Beacon. We did that all the time. So we walked there quite a lot. And as I said, it certainly, the routes, when we walked up, was part of the adventure of just being part of the environment that was beautiful for us. And of course, just going up on the mountain in itself had its own therapy. But it was always hard getting up there, but it was beautiful once you're on top. And there were times when we would sleep in the caves. There were caves up there, and we would take coffee with and produce and things like that. And so that was another part of the adventure. But of course, being up there and being able to see this incredible beauty, that was in itself such a wonderful experience for all of us.
The mountain was an interesting place for the children of District 6 to explore. They could enjoy the many trails like Platteklip Gorge, Kasteelspoort and Skeleton Gorge, and always found a new adventure to embark on. The younger kids, though, they had to get creative and find a different reason to justify their time on the mountain.
We used to go when we were small, when we were youngsters. In those days you used to have a reason for everything. My reason for going to the mountain, in inverted commas, was ostensibly to fetch wood. But it was actually to be able to have one of these carts, these street carts, the Eini wheel, as we used to say, and the pram wheels in front and the Eini wheels in the back, the ball bearings. And each of us used to build in a little vanchi, but that was for racing down the hill. And sooner or later, Dad would say, why are you building a damn thing? No, we're going to fetch wood. Then we used to go fetch wood along the mountain slopes. But the mountain slopes were not the mountain, but of course you'd stop there and then you'd go exploring. The first time I was really on the mountain was when I was at the quarry here at the bottom end of Devil's Peak, at massive quarry there. And then you naturally gravitated. We went into that big cave there that was just on the other side of the quarry. And then as we grew older, 15, 16 I remember, we used to go to the mountain proper. Then we used to go all along the pipe track, and we'd go up at Kasteelspoort. We'd make provision for each other and one another to, right, you need this, you need that. Okay, we're all going to meet together at a certain day, like Thursday or Friday afternoon late. Then we go up the mountain. Then we come back on Saturday afternoon late, even sometimes Saturday night, because there was church on Sunday. But Easter time, we used to spend virtually the entire Easter up there. And if we ran short, we just ran down the mountain, 25 minutes down. It was amazing how quick we were, because we used to time one another and say, how fast can you run down? And the mountain itself that was like our picnic spot, you see.
Patrick O'Connell was not the only one who went to fetch wood on the slopes of Table Mountain. Vincent Kolbe also used this excuse, buying time to experience the different adventures the mountain had to offer.
As a kid, we used to have little carts. We used to make carts, and we'd go up, and the rangers would say you can get the wood and put in your currency. And then coming down the slopes of the mountain or on the streets and maneuvering your cart with this, even if there's one piece, your grandmother's stove. It was a great adventure going to the mountain. And of course, you see things like the blockhouse, the King's blockhouse, the Queen's blockhouse. You see Rose Memorial. And of course, we grew up seeing the temple on top, which is the cable station. And watching those cable cars going up and down, and you and your ma would sit on the stoop and watch the clouds. Here one is coming down, here one is going up. This whole relationship with the mountain is like a big TV screen. You sit on your stoop, and our house faced the mountain. And then, of course, the Boy Scouts you join, and then we go to the Glen. They teach you Boy Scout tricks. And then, of course, you go up Kasteelspoort. That was the way we went up, Kasteelspoort. And then you get to the top of Table Mountain, and then you see all the stuff that you see. But of course, you're still a boy, so your interest isn't like broad. And then of course, Platteklip is the next one you're supposed to like tackle. You see, and we go up Platteklip, and it's like hot, and it's white stones, and it's uncomfortable, and you can see why people didn't go up there, and so and so.
The children of District 6 all found different ways to spend time on the mountain. While Vincent Kolbe and Patrick O'Connell used the "we are collecting wood" excuse, others, like Fuad Sawyer, was introduced to the mountain by getting involved in his school's extramural activities and joining the Scouts.
I didn't know much about the mountain. First of all, I think we started off taking a little walk across the one end of the mountain, going to up the Val Drive. Then we would come out at the Rhodes Memorial. And I used to remember we were all saying, Sunday we are going to the mountain, Sunday we're going to the zoo. Until the later years, the schools used to speak about, we're taking a walk up the pipe track, and we're going up to Table Mountain. And I remember I had fun when climbing the mountain, because I was a little bit, at that time, on the stout side. I used to carry my bags filled up with food while the others climbed, and I used to tuck in half the way. By the time I reached the top of the mountain, there was no food. And secondly, that's how it all started. And also, that was on one of the first trips of the mountain. Coming down, what I would normally do, I would normally leave about half an hour before them, so that I was a couple of minutes ahead of them down. And it was wonderful times, because we were taught how to make braais, and all that. At that time, they also had the Boy Scouts, and I well remember, I can't remember the name of the Scouts, but I remember one of the guys there, Mr. Harding, very well, who was the Scout leader, and everybody, whether you were now Christian or Muslim, wanted to join the Scouts because of the activities. And I remember on the mountain, we always used to inscribe our names on certain of the rocks, and you'll come there the next time, it would either still be there or it would just have gone. And halfway on the mountain, sometimes we used to take a break. Besides eating up my sandwich halfway up, having nothing when I'm up there, and when the others looked for sandwiches, there was nothing. That's one of them. But one of them, I was sitting nicely and enjoying a cool drink at the time, and somebody said, be careful, there's a scorpion behind you. And the next minute I went shouting up into the air because I was a bit afraid of little insects and things. Not afraid of an insect, but always careful, because I thought, when the insects bite you, it could be disastrous. So I guess that they must probably thought, you're eating it up and we're going to give you quite a good fright.
Fuad Sawyer was not the only victim of practical jokes on the mountain. On the contrary, practical jokes was a common occurrence among friends, and we heard a few more practical jokes in the Table Mountain collection. Let's listen to Joe Schaffers as he played a practical joke on one of his friends.
Well, I remember one evening we were going up over the Easter weekend, and then walking along the pipe track we came across a dead snake. Someone had killed it prior to us coming through there. It looked like a nacht adder, a night adder. And then just for the hell of it, I picked it up, put it across my haversack, and took it up to the mountain with me. Now there's a section on Kasteelpoort called Breakfast Rock where everybody stops, and there's a breather after walking up. So what I did, I put the snake on the edge of this, because I know when you put your hand up, you've got to put the rock, your hand on top of the rock to pull yourself up. And then of course we sat on the top because we knew the rest of your crew was coming up about an hour after us. So we sat and we lay on the top of the mountain, listening patiently. Unfortunately, no other strange people came up, and that's just our crew. You could hear them. That is the beauty of the crew that I was with. You could hear them coming up. And they came up and walking, and then we sat. And we watched the hand come up, and it just grabbed it, went onto the snake. But you could visualize the guy at the bottom there, with his hand on the snake. He feels and he knows what it is he's touching. And of course the reaction as he throws himself backwards, snake and all, he throws himself back and he fell backwards. He fell down, of course we jumped up, killing ourselves, and he landed on his back in the bushes and it was breaking of bottles and stuff. Right? So when I picked him up, the guy was as white as a sheet.
Was he injured?
He wasn't injured. His pride was injured more than anything else.
While it does sound like the mountain was all fun and games, in between the picnics and the sleepovers in caves, there were a few close calls as many hikers and climbers, like Stan Abrams, found themselves stuck in the mist.
Just two of us went up one night. It probably was a silly thing to do, to go up in the night time, And as I said, we just loved the mountain, and we said, going up the mountain, I said, yes, of course, we put a couple of sandwiches in and off you go. And then a very heavy mist came up, and we went up, and we kept walking, but of course we got hopeless because the mist came so sudden. And we just walked, and then in the end I said to my friend, I said, no, we can't, we must stop. We mustn't walk on anymore. We can't see anything. I haven't got a torch, we got nothing. So we stopped and took our blankets and just rolled in it, and we laid there. When the mist lifted early the next morning, because I said we went in the evening, if we took a step further, we would have gone down a ravine. We would have died, we would have fallen, both of us. It was just a step. We actually were lying, and then I think that was the most incredible. It's like we were just told, Spirit, stop us. He stopped us there, and that was, you know, with your hair just raised on your head, and yet you at one had a sense that there was somebody actually looking over you for that thing too. So that was a very, very frightening experience, and yet it taught us something too. Don't do things on the spur of the moment, plan your way, or rather try to find out what the weather is. But we were so enthralled with the mountain, we just wanted to be there, you know, so...
Stan Abrams put it aptly. They were enthralled by the mountain. Whether it was a good climb or a close call, District 6ers found solace in the mountain. They found a sense of freedom that couldn't be felt in the city. But they were not alone in their experience and sense of the mountain. Children growing up all along the different slopes of Table Mountain, in areas like Constantia, Protea Village, and Hout Bay, had the same kind of relationship with the mountain, the same culture of mountaineering, something Vincent Kolbe articulates very well.
The city of Cape Town grew around the mountain from the earliest days because of water, because of fertile soil, and so on and so on. So think of the people who not only, for whom the top of the mountain wasn't important, but the slopes. If you lived in Protea Village, for instance, which is below Kirstenbosch Gardens, and those people have been there since the days of slavery, because they worked in Jan van Riebeeck's farm there, which Kirstenbosch was Jan van Riebeeck's farm. And at Hong Constantia, that's farm labor in the olden days, right? And those people, that's their piece of earth. But whether you grew up in Newlands, or whether you grew up in Claremont, or whether you grew up in Wynberg or in Hout Bay, the mountain was accessible, and children used to play, and those who were serious climbed. When they were removed by the Group Areas Act in the 1960s and 70s, and they were told to go live in Gorge Park, which people were totally bewildered. Totally bewildered. It's like putting an Eskimo in the tropics, and they are still in pain today. You know, that was cruel. Besides, like your home, your community, and stuff like that. I think the shit started with the racism. How they can do things like have things for whites only, you know, a mountain or a hut or a walk. It was, that spoils things a lot for people growing up in the city.
So the apartheid government introduced the Group Areas Act in 1950. This law cemented centuries of segregationist and racist policies that played out not only in the inner city and surrounding neighborhoods, but on the mountain as well. In 1957, a substantial part of the Table Mountain Range was declared a white group area. This included communities situated along the slopes of the mountain. And in the years that followed, the people who lived in those communities were forcibly removed to the Cape Flats. They were taken away from their homes, their communities, and their environment. Then we had the Separate Amenities Act of 1953. This law further cemented the racial segregation of public spaces and amenities, including access points to trails, hikes, and other facilities on Table Mountain. This is why, from the 1960s onwards, we hear more stories of division and marginalization on the mountain, all based on race. This is something Colleen Knipe-Solomon can attest to.
Well, look, obviously we were all marginalized. We were like totally different groups came from like two separate continents. There was our hut, which was called the Cape Province Mountain Club, and the opposite hut, which was called the Mountain Club of South Africa, which was the White Mountain Club, the affluent and rich mountain club. And we never crossed that divided line after the 60s. Prior to that, I know in my dad's time, I remember then having Jewish members of our club. But if I recall, from 65, there was the strict enforcement. And that most of those people that socialized or belonged to the Mountain Club at that stage emigrated. But yes, we had there was always this anxiety and animosity with people directed at the different people on the mountain.
Table Mountain became a contentious place, a divided place. But despite this, people still felt a longing to be on the mountain. And while some people could still see parts of the mountain from their home on the Cape Flats, it was not the same. It was completely different.
The group areas was a big thing. People having to go and live on the Cape Flats. And you'll hear Armin saying on his tape, I miss the sea, I miss the mountain, you know. And when I went to live on the Cape Flats, when I was transferred from Liberman, where I grew up in that building as a child and worked as a librarian. And I'd gone work in Bonteheuwel, which was the first coloured group areas township. And it was like raw. It was like moving into George Orwell, those matchbox houses, the monotony. After this, and this flatness and the sand, after this beautiful mountain slope, the greenery, the sea, the bustling life of District 6. The moment I went to Bonteheuwel, it was like this uprootedness, this disruption. It just took me out of my environment into this bleak, new environment and make you think hard. But the thing is, you looked at that mountain, that distant mountain, in a strange new way when you look at it from Bonteheuwel. You know? Yes. It's still there. It's not like totally gone. You know? Yeah, and you start relating to the sand and the Cape Flats and the new life there and your new social networks and such, and eventually become a Cape Flats person to the extent that I just wasn't interested in District 6 anymore. Yeah, I would visit my mother and get on with my life.
Being forcibly removed from the inner city to the Cape Flats affected people in many different ways, impacting on their relationships to people and with places. For Vincent Kolbe, the move severed his connection to District 6 and the mountain itself. But for others, like Colleen Knipe-Solomon, it was different. She tried to stay connected to the mountain, however difficult it became.
When we went to the mountain, we walked down to Cape Town. You used to get the bus from Addie Street and you'd go up. Sometimes you even walked all the way up. It depended. So you didn't need that type of money. Obviously, once we moved out of the area, it became a totally different thing. It became difficult. We didn't have the transport. It meant cost, the time constraints, when would we be coming back?
These were the type of things people now had to consider if they wanted to spend time on the mountain. Things they simply did not have to think about when they lived in District 6. They could no longer walk out of their front door and step right onto the foot of Table Mountain. Moving to the Cape Flats changed things for people. Not only did they lose their home and their community, they lost access to the mountain.
For me, it's always been a great loss, being just taken away from it, because where we lived, the mountain was the background, you know, and whenever you got up in the mornings, you would actually see it. So from the spiritual aspect, it's within your very psyche. You can't move away from it. You know, where one moves away and you don't see it, that is a kind of a loss in a sense, because it's so big and so beautiful and so permanent.
Listening to Stan Abrams' interview, I sense his longing to once again be in the shadows of Table Mountain. But Stan Abrams was not alone in feeling this way. I sensed that same feeling of longing as I listened to many of the other interviews. And while Stan Abrams could not see the mountain from his home on the Cape Flats, Joe Schaffers could. And I wondered if that made a difference to him. Did it soothe his longing to once again be close to the mountain?
Well, at Fairwoods now I can see the mountains of Kirstenbosch. That side I can see the back of Devil's Peak. So there's still a longing to go, and you know, the mere fact that you had been there, and you think of how many Cape Townians throughout their whole life hadn't been up the mountain yet, and they don't know what they're missing. Of climbing Table Mountain, going up Platteklip Gorge, walking to the cable station, and then having this magnificent view of Cape Town. That is, and I think in anybody's books, that is the best experience, your first experience of mountaineering, when you get to the top and you can look over this expanse of the whole of the peninsula, going to the one side of the mountain, looking over the Hout Bay side of the Oudergraal side of the mountain, and then looking over the Cape Town side as far as Hottentots, Holland Mountains, seeing, you know, Robben Island in the distance with Lion's Head below you on a beautiful clear day. I tell you that it's a sight that you can say you can die after that.
Whether people can see Table Mountain from their homes on the Cape Flats or not, that longing to physically be near to the mountain, to wake up in its shadow, walk up the slopes and feel the southeaster blowing on their faces, that longing does not go away. And while some ex-residents were able to return to District 6 through the South African government's restitution process, many are still waiting. Recently, I had the opportunity to meet Colleen Knipe-Solomon and listen to some of the stories she shared with a group of tourists in the museum. Still, in her 70s, I sense her longing to climb the mountain again. I sense the connection she still feels with the mountain as she talks about the adventures she had in her younger years. For people like Colleen Knipe-Solomon, Joe Schaffers, Stan Abrams, Vincent Kolbe, Fuad Sawyer, and Patrick O'Connell, and the many other mountaineers not included in this podcast, Table Mountain is alive. It still speaks to them. And no matter how far away they move from the mountain, that longing, that connection will always be there. If you would like to listen to some more tales of the Table Mountain collection, you can find the full interviews in the District 6 Museum archive. I'm Hendricks, and thank you for listening. No matter where we are here.